Hi, I'm Katrina, and this is Boldly Challenging Ableism. I'm your host, Katrina Simons. I'm the Community Program Specialist at the Institute on Community Integration at the University of Minnesota. This program explores various topics that impact people with disabilities in our community. Each episode addresses a different aspect of our society within the context of ableism. Ableism is the prejudice that stems from the belief or belief system that assumes someone is less capable or less worthy because of a real or perceived difference in ability or function. On this program, we hope to answer some questions you may have been afraid to ask, or maybe some you didn't even know you had. Thanks for joining us. I hope you enjoy the conversation. Welcome, everybody, to Boldly. I'm not even going to try to think about what number episode this is because we have been at this for a long time, so can't rush perfection. But today we're going to talk about ableism and sex, so stick around because whether you admit it or not, you want to hear the episode. Our guest today is Katherine McLaughlin from Elevatus Training. Welcome, Katherine. Can you introduce yourself to the audience?
Absolutely. Hello, audience. I am Katherine McLaughlin, and I'm a sexuality educator and trainer. And I've been doing this work for over 30 years. And really, what I thought I would tell you a little bit about how I got into this topic.
Yeah.
So I was working for Planned Parenthood. I was doing education in the schools, talking to young people about contraception and how to talk to their kids about sexuality. And developmental disability agencies reached out to me and said, we need help addressing this with people with disabilities. And then at that same time, I had an accident and acquired a disability. And I was in my mid-20s. So I think those two pieces kind of came together. When all of a sudden I had a disability, I realized people were treating me differently because I had a disability. I was the exact same person. I just had gone through an experience, and now I was getting around in a different way. But I was really basically the same person. And all of a sudden, people were treating me differently. So I got interested in disability awareness. I was doing sexuality education. They kind of both came together. So that's really how it all began.
Okay, that's great. Let's see. Can you tell us a little bit about Elevatus Training and what your company does?
Yeah, absolutely. So Elevatus, and the name comes from this idea of elevating the status of all people. And so elevate us. And about 6 years ago, I started Elevatus. I've been doing this work, like I said, for over 30 years. And I would work in sort of a small business on the side. I would do training while I work full time in other ways. But about 6 years ago, there was enough of a request for me to train others that I was able to start doing this full time. So that's when Elevatus started. And what we do is we provide education and training, and we create education materials and tools and all kinds of things so that people can address sexuality. Now, it could be a direct support provider talking one-on-one with someone about it, or it could be a parent talking to their own child, or it could be a self-advocate or a person with a disability wanting to learn about the topic. Or I do a lot of work with self-advocates in training them to be peer sexuality educators. So I also train self-advocates to lead workshops and classes for people with disabilities too.
Okay, and you don't live here in Minnesota, right?
I do not. I live in New Hampshire.
New Hampshire, okay.
Yep.
And before you had Elevatus Training, what kinds of other jobs did you have? Did they all have to do with sexuality?
Yeah, well, pretty much. I worked at Planned Parenthood for 22 years, and that's when I first started doing this work. I also worked at a local college teaching human sexuality to students in the college. And I also just did general health education kinds of work over the years.
Okay, so a sexuality educator, do you go to school to become one of those, or?
Yeah, that's a good question. No, you don't actually. It's different than like a teacher, a school teacher, where you have to be, go to school. But, it's good to get trained and it's good to learn. So I learned on the job through Planned Parenthood. and learned all about sexuality and how to teach, and just did lots and lots and lots of teaching and training.
Okay, because the only exposure I've ever had to a sexuality education is on the educator is on the show Sex Education, and it was on Netflix. I don't know. Did you see it?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, were you a big fan? I was a big fan. Were you a big
I'm
fan?
really big fan.
Yeah,
It's amazing.
I loved it. Okay, so you can get trained as a sexuality educator in lots of different ways. Perfect.
Yeah, but in there, that the mother was a sex therapist.
Yeah, that's different.
Yeah, she went to school and all that. Really, anyone can be a sexuality educator. You can become certified after you teach a number of years and learn a certain thing. You have to go through a certain process, but people start teaching right away.
So you live with an acquired disability, as you said before. If you're comfortable talking about it, I'm wondering if you notice changes in how people talk to you about sex, or how they talked about sex around you once you were injured, and if you could talk a little bit more in depth or specifically about that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think as a culture, we don't talk about it anyway, whether you have a disability or not. So
Right.
there is that. I saw your question and I was thinking about it, and I wouldn't say, I think it's a little different for me because I'm talking about this topic a lot. So it's a little different, but I would say there's been some times when I realized people were looking at me differently. So when I first had my accident, I was in rehab for my spinal cord injury.
Yeah.
And the OT, they handle sexuality education.
Okay.
And she said, you can have babies, which is great. And I was really happy about that. But I wanted to know a lot more than that.
Right.
So very, very focused on reproduction instead of sexuality, which is much broader than that. So I've noticed that. Also, I have 2 kids. They're in their 20s. But when I was pregnant, people assumed that I was in a wheelchair because something to do with the pregnancy, that the pregnancy came first and then came the wheelchair, versus someone in a wheelchair getting pregnant.
Okay, and did you know they have a whole book about pregnancy for women with physical disabilities now? I forget the author, but if you've seen it, great. And if not, I'll try to find it, like the name of it.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure they have more than one book, but it was a really good book.
Well, I don't know if they're sure, because lots of times there isn't a lot of stuff. So it might be new. But just that feeling, that people were looking at me like there was no way a person in a wheelchair would decide to have a child. There's just no way,
Yeah.
So I think I noticed some of that more than people stopped talking to me. But I do know that, and maybe you can speak to this as well. I know a lot of self-advocates say that they notice that their siblings get different kinds of messages than they did. So they saw their parents talking to their sibling, their brother or whatever, and talking about sexuality, but then never talked to them. And so they sort of noticed that difference.
Yeah, no, I'm a twin, so we got the same, just because it would have been very, very obvious to me that, but I think also my parents wanted me to have the same type of education as my sisters as well, but I definitely got the same education as other people that were not disabled. But I went to high school in the OOs, and I think by then things had already changed a little bit in that department.
Yeah.
Because I know there was the social worker at my high school was already running like a class or a group or whatever, a session for the students in my school with IDD on everything, but that was part of it. So, but I went to the regular health class with other mainstream, but there were other options, is my point.
Yeah, yeah. Well, a lot of self-advocates tell me that they're in the mainstream health class learning about nutrition, and then the sexuality unit starts and they're taken out of class.
No, I was really excited because we got to take a quiz, and I did the best on the quiz because I studied a lot, and
there you go.
And my mom, I think, or not my mom, my dad too, but my mom, both my parents, I think, just wanted me to know that I also had the same responsibility as everybody else when it came to sex.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
But I don't have I don't struggle with some parts of the I in IDD, and so I think maybe that was why. And I think I've been working with people with IDD for 15 years, but not really with sexuality at all. But I think maybe a pattern that I've seen is we are worried to talk about it because we think it's better that they don't know, because then they won't do anything. But we know now, and I don't know how long we've known it, that just like with regular teenagers and teenagers that don't have disabilities, that's the wrong way to approach it.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I think there's a lot of myths about it. Like if we talk about it, it'll give them ideas. And really, I'm always saying knowledge is power, knowledge is protection. Ignorance is not bliss.
Yeah. Well, and I just think that that's really, even if it wasn't about sexuality, that would be a really offensive line of thinking, because you're basically saying that people with intellectual disabilities don't think on their own. And they do.
Right.
They do. Just because you have an intellectual disability doesn't mean you don't think and come up with your own ideas and inform your opinions on how you feel about the world. And that's also important.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. But I think you're right. It's probably the cognitive impairment piece that makes it even harder to have access to sexuality education.
So have you seen that shift happen in the course of your work?
The shift of
not talking to people with intellectual disabilities about sex.
Oh yeah. I think, yeah, I mean, if I compare 20 years ago to now, yeah, there's definitely been a shift. I think what I've noticed is 20 years ago, people would say, oh, will you come in and work with people with IDD around this topic? And so I would come in, I would teach and do all this stuff. Now, more people are saying, okay, we'll do it, but we just need some support. So that's a lot of what I do at Elevatus, is I'm training people to do stuff that I did for years.
And are you happy to have them do it, or do you miss it when you would get to do it?
I still do it myself too.
Okay.
No, I just think there's such a need that the more people that are comfortable talking about it, the more we can change some of these statistics and change people's lives. So no, I think it's great.
Okay, so it's not like if they do it, you don't get to do it. There's so much need for it that everybody should be doing it.
Exactly.
Like
exactly.
we should all learn CPR. We should all learn how to talk to lots of different people about sexuality.
That's right. Exactly. We should all be sexuality educators.
Okay. Do you get a lot of pushback from the families of persons with IDD, or not really?
I do get some, absolutely. And just like people without disabilities, there's some resistance there too.
Oh, yeah, because like if you're really religious or whatever.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean, there's probably more around disability. And I think that just in general, a lot of and parents can feel really worried about this.
That whole dignity of risk thing. And I don't want them to take the risk because it might be more dangerous, and I want to protect them.
Right, exactly. And, you hear about the statistics around sexual abuse, and then you say, yeah, I'm just going to protect instead of educate. I'm just going to keep them safe and close. And that actually makes people more at risk.
Because I think no matter who you are, when you educate yourself about sexuality, you are protecting yourself, because you can make the right choices and
exactly
and have the right tools to make good decisions and then make them.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's one thing, it's one thing to make decisions, but we really want to make informed decisions, right?
Yeah.
Totally.
So when you do get pushback from families, what might that look like?
Well, you could hear things like, I don't want to open a can of worms, or not, my child's not interested. They don't really need this, or, sometimes I'll hear things like that talk about sort of mental age, like, well, they're really only a 6-year-old, mentally. And so I have to do a lot of just sort of dispelling myths. Like if you talk about it, actually that'll reduce risk. And young people who talk in particular to their parents are more likely to wait to have sex. And if they do have sex, more likely to use protection. So I have to just eliminate some of those myths that are out there around the topic. Yeah, and also I often will say to people who are resistant, like, what worries you about that?
Right.
To sort of get underneath, like, what is it that's worrying you about your child learning about this? So then I can reassure, like, once I understand what the worry is, then I can talk about how sexuality education is prevention.
Right. So you're not technically a therapist, but kind of that mindset of meeting people where they're at.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yep, yep, and gently nudge.
Okay. What is the most surprising thing about working and specializing in the intersection of sexuality, and disability?
One of the most surprising thing. I mean, I think some of what we talked about, like how much resistance there can be,
Yeah.
and just that mindset that education is dangerous or something. So I think that's kind of somewhat surprising. I find that people with disabilities want to learn about this. They say, one person said, I learned by the school of hard knocks, and I'm still getting over the trauma of learning the hard way. Um, so, people want to learn about this, people with disabilities, they want this in their lives. And so they're not the barrier. Usually the barrier is people that are surrounding them.
Right.
And, maybe it's a professional or a parent or a guardian, and they're the ones that seem to be more resistant, where the people themselves are like, yes, I want to learn about this. I'm a human. And so I think I have to do a lot of everyone is a sexual being, and that doesn't mean they're having sex. It means they have a sexuality. And since everyone has a sexuality, we all need to learn about it. So, yeah, so that's kind of a surprise. I think the other thing, when I first started doing this work, there weren't a lot of materials available. So I went to work with a group of self advocates in Vermont, Green Mountain Self Advocates.
Yeah, we know. We work with Max Burrows.
Oh, yeah. Yes, Max is my friend. Yep, we go way back. Yeah, so Max, so that whole group, this was years ago. I think even before Max was working there. And I went to talk to them and I said, "Why do you want to learn and about this topic?" And they said, "Hold on a second, nothing about us without us. We want to help you create these materials. We want to be part of designing it. Oh, and we also want to be one of the teachers of this." And so I think for me, that was like one of those aha moments where I was like, of course, that makes absolute sense. Here I was thinking, oh, I'll just figure it all out. I'll make my own curriculum. And they were like, no, I don't think so. Uh, so that was kind of a surprise for me. Like, I hadn't really thought about it. And then when they said, and we want to be one of the teachers, I was like,
Okay.
you go.
Yep. You were like, we're gonna have to make a shift here, but okay.
Exactly. Right. And good thing they woke me up.
What do you think still needs to change about our thinking around sexuality and disability?
Well, I think first, just in general, sexuality, that as a culture, whether you have a disability or not, we really need to get over this negative view we have of it. And what I do is I often ask people, like, growing up, what was the primary message you got about sexuality and relationships? And people say the number one thing I hear is, don't talk about it.
Right.
I think that's something that we have to start talking about in general. It's okay to talk about this topic. It's an important, healthy, positive part of people's lives. Like, change the messages that we have around it. So I think that needs to happen. And then if we layer disability on, yeah, like, what are our thoughts about people with disabilities? They're not interested in this. They don't want this. They probably can't do this or that. To change our thinking that everyone is a sexual being. So I think that still needs to happen. And just really, like, even though it's uncomfortable, it's okay to talk about it. Did you ever see the movie Mean Girls?
I did. I love that movie, and I love Tina Fey.
Yes, I love Tina Fey too.
Big fan.
Do you remember the gym teacher? He says,
Yeah.
if you have sex, you'll get chlamydia and you will die. Right. So that's kind of how we talk about it in our culture.
Right. And that's not how we should talk about it anymore.
No, let's stop that.
It's not 1950s. Let's move on.
There you go. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So we try to scare people and control them rather than give them information and trust them and help them make their own choices.
Right. And we know that abstinence only sex education doesn't work. We've been there.
That's right. We've been there, done that, doesn't work.
So you said that you were more surprised at the attitude towards your pregnancy when you had your spinal cord injury than you were about the differences that people had talking to you about sex, because you were already good at talking about sex before your injury, and so that didn't really change. How long was it between your injury and your pregnancy? So what I'm wondering is, were you maybe still getting used to the way people respond to people in wheelchairs in general? Because that can be weird.
Yeah. So I was 26 when I had my injury.
Okay.
And then I had my first child at 31.
Okay, so it was a good amount of time. So it would have been the pregnancy, not just the wheelchair.
Right.
And then my other question is, what made you want to be a sexuality educator in the first place?
I really always loved Planned Parenthood as an organization.
Okay.
You know, I went there as a teenager and I just liked the vibe of the place, you know, and so I always thought I would like to work in a place like that. And so I started working for Planned Parenthood in the health center.
Yeah.
And then a position as an educator opened up and I was like, oh, I'd love to do that. You know, so it just kind of unfolded.
Is it okay if I ask you what the years were, what like around the decade was that you started working at Planned Parenthood?
Yeah, no, I'm happy to tell you I'm 60 years old.
Okay.
So I started at Planned Parenthood in the 80s.
Okay, because my parents used to talk about it in the 70s, and they really support the mission of Planned Parenthood. They're like you. They have similar politics to you. And then my other question is, did you know Cecil Richards?
I know of her, and I've been in the same room with her, and I'm really sad she's no longer with us.
I know. I was kind of jelly that, I mean, obviously I was devastated that she passed, but I was kind of jelly that she didn't have to watch or think about what to do instead of watch the inauguration of Trump. Because I was like, well, at least she doesn't have to see, like, everything she worked for get.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was very sad.
Yeah, very sad. Yeah, she was amazing. And her mother was as well.
Oh, I didn't know her mother. Did you know her mother?
Her mother was the governor of Texas, Ann Richards.
Oh, I didn't know. Oh, I know who Ann Richards is. I didn't make the connection.
Yeah,
okay.
Exactly.
So I just made the connection. All right. Now time for the last question. Is there anything else you want to share with us or plug or anything like that?
Yeah. Well, I have two things. One is if people want to check out my website, it's Elevatus, ELEVATUS training.com. We got lots of free resources. You can check out trainings that are coming up, get on our email list. The other thing I wanted to talk about was we did this project with the Office of People with Developmental Disabilities, the Institute on Community Integration, and SANY's Self-Advocacy Association of New York State, and Elevatus. So the 4 different organizations worked on these 4 empowerment videos about sexuality and people with developmental disabilities. The first one is just kind of a general video on how people with disabilities don't have information about it and how they wish they did. And the second one is about what is sexual self-advocacy. And the third one is sexual feelings and relationships. And the fourth is consent. And all of them are just part of this empowerment series for people with disabilities. And it really changes those messages. It's not like if you have sex, you'll get chlamydia and you will die. These videos are much more about it's okay, you're a sexual person. It's okay to ask for help. It's okay to learn. It's okay to talk about it. So check them out because they're really positive and in the direction I would like to see things going.
I think Tina Fey would really support the new messaging. I'm going to send it to her.
Do it.
I'm going to send it to her publicist.
Okay, do it.
Amy Poehler, too.
Yes.
Amy Poehler has a friend with cerebral palsy. So maybe if I send it to that person, Amy Poehler can see it and then send it to Tina Fey.
Great.
I don't think they're going to look at it. I think they have a very full inbox, but we can try.
I'm all about trying.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with giving it your effort.
No, that's right. I completely agree, Katrina.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. This was a fascinating conversation, and I'm really glad we could make it work.
Me too. Thank you.
For everybody who's watching, this is Boldly, and we hope to see you next time. Oh my God, we have to do it again?
No.
Oh God, okay, we got it.
Yeah, we can. I can work with that.
Okay.
Boldly Challenging Ableism is a co-production of AM 950, the progressive voice of Minnesota, and the Institute on Community Integration at the University of Minnesota. For more information, please visit ici.umn.edu.